If your proposals are getting ghosted, this is the fix. We're going to be diving into the no brainer close, the exact process contractors use to move from quoting to closing with confidence. I want you guys to learn how to surface hidden objections and simplify the decision making process and deliver clarity that makes saying yes feel easy. All right, welcome to today's session on mastering the close in multifamily roofing sales. And if you're a contractor serving multifamily property managers, you know that closing isn't about getting a signature. It's about operational clarity and making property managers confident and removing every bit of risk from their decision. In today's market, managers want to know that they're protected and that their owners are covered and that their tenants are not going to be blindsided with work getting completed. So we're going to be breaking down the actionable steps and operational best practices that turn hesitation into clear, confident yes on every multifamily deal. And we're going to cover how to de-risk the decision. So we're going to use strategic closing questions and handling objections all in a way that builds long-term business, not just transactions.
All right, nice. Thanks, Kevin. So let's get right into it. For contractors and project leads working in multifamily, what's the first operational step you recommend when it's time to close out a meeting with a property manager or a decision maker?
I mean, I think the first step is to always restate the manager's pain points using their language. When you map out your solution in clear steps using the way that they speak, the way that they communicate, and when you're doing this, you're not just reviewing the technical side, you're showing them that you listened and you're addressing exactly what matters to them. For example, if they're stressing about emergency repairs or unpredictable invoices, you want to tell them that you mentioned your biggest headache in the last minute leaks, right? Those emergency leaks that come through, or how to really eliminate those leaks is by through the onboarding process, through your pre-mobilization, through routine inspections, through updates, and then through proactive communication. And if you can lay out a sequence of really what happens next, that operational clarity is what gives them confidence to want to move forward. I would recommend some sort of checklist to restate their pains and outline your process to really make sure that you are speaking in a clear and actionable way that are addressing their pain points. So there's really no guesswork and there's no confusion.
Right. Okay. And then once you've restated their pain and you've shared your solution, how do you move the conversation from thinking about it to a decision without adding too much pressure?
Well, I mean, there's got to be some closing questions that focus on logistics and execution, not just are you ready to move forward or which option fits your budget and timeline, or who should I send scheduling details to. Those questions really assume progress and make the close part of the workflow, and not a hurdle. So if you sense that there's hesitation, you want to use direct follow-up, maybe something like, what's the one thing holding you back from wrapping this up today? The surface are going to have hidden issues that really need to be opened up, and you need to find what those hidden issues are for the approvals and bring them out into the open so that you can address them on the spot. The goal is to make every next step feel routine and feel safe, so that they're not really just spending money, but they're investing into you, and it's never a leap of faith.
Right. And then talking about objections, then Kevin, every manager has objections, and even if they're not getting voiced, they've got objections on the inside that they're thinking. Yeah. So what's the best practice for surfacing those objections and then addressing them?
Well, I mean, if you want to really normalize objections and treat them as part of the process, don't feel uncomfortable about objections. I think that, starting by acknowledging the concern directly, hey, that's a fair question. A lot of managers worry about projects dragging on or projects going over budget. But what you want to do is tie it in and share your operational proof. So don't just talk the talk, but show them through a workflow how you and your team solve these issues, how you avoid these issues proactively before they even come up. For example, we send daily updates, we call them EODs, and we provide transparent invoicing. And so you always have a single point of contact, and that would be the project manager that's going to run this job after it's sold. But if you offer evidence, from really referencing either another manager, a job that you did in the past, right, as a referral that had that same concern, but now is a repeat client and you're handling their whole portfolio, and you can use that experience as the key steps to really help acknowledge, share your system, and provide proof. And that only dissolves the objection, but it builds trust for the long term.
Awesome. Okay, so let's pause for a moment. For those of you watching, jot down a question that maybe you've used to help a manager move forward, or maybe a common objection that keeps tripping you up.
Yeah.
Drop them in the comments below. Let us know what they are. If you have a question, attach that question to your comment and we'll come by and respond to those too. Moving forward, a lot of contractors get stuck quoting, but not closing. So what does it look like operationally to turn quoting into a consistent closing?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to clarity and follow through, not just following up, but don't just send a quote and wait. Summarize the manager's needs. I always look at clarifying your solution and then guide them through the close. We all need to close deals. That's what pays our bills. But we want to go from just closing and providing service to being able to serve, right? And when we're serving these property managers, a huge difference. And when we're looking at being able to really even take this one step further and guiding them through, you can say, here's what you need, here's what we're delivering, and here's how it helps. But if you assume the close by saying, hey, let's get to the paperwork started so that we don't have to worry about that anymore, and we can start getting the mobilization done with the team, the handoff has to be something that's great from a salesperson to a project manager. But if you're sending the agreement and you're setting up a pre-mobilization call, and you can spell out exactly what happens next so the property manager is not surprised. And I'd recommend tracking the close rate and the rep, the script, even the debriefing, the outcome. And if something stalls, you want to find out, did we restate the pain? Did we outline the solution clearly? Did we address every objection? Because I think things stall out, not necessarily because of money. I think because they don't have enough information to make a decision. And if you can make it a process and make it repeatable, I think you'll see that you're going to win a heck of a lot more times.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And it's practical too. So for teams then that want to systematize this, what metrics, what operational checkpoints would you suggest that they track so that they can know that their close process is actually working?
I mean, I think there's a couple of key metrics that you can track. Close rate by rep is pretty easy, but also by script, right? And then average sales, the cycle, what's the length of that sales cycle, the number of objections that surfaced, and then how many of those were resolved, how many proposals moved from quoted to scheduled, and then also getting post-close feedback from the property managers. Do they feel informed and supported? So when we were running our shop, we had account managers, we had salespeople, and then we had project managers. So the account managers were handling things at a portfolio level with the regionals, and then the salespeople were more on-site, community by community, and the project managers would run the jobs after they were sold. And everything needs to essentially stay in one folder, stay in review. And if you can look at community by community, portfolio by portfolio for those metrics, and I think you'll really see that if you're reviewing these numbers monthly and you can tweak your process based on what you're seeing, it's not just about closing more deals, but it's about building the reputation for consistency and reliability.
Nice. Yeah, I would agree. And then, you got to consider risk mitigation too. So after you secure the deal, what's the best practice for these guys, Kevin, for ensuring seamless handoff to the operations for the project team so that trust isn't lost between the close and the kickoff?
Whew. Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, right after a close, just sending an email restating, the approved scope and the next steps and the exact timeline, those are great. But if a project manager is going to lead the job, I think the first thing is to introduce them right away. And I think if the salesperson can introduce the project manager who's going to run that project and do the pre-mobilization, set up that onboarding call, and explain how and when you'll communicate these updates throughout. But also, it's important for the salesman to just not disappear. Because I think that with the salesman, the account manager, the project manager, all in play, it eliminates confusion and it keeps the manager confident. And you never want to leave the manager wondering what happened is next, right? What's going to happen? When are we getting materials delivered? When are we staging? Where is everything going? But I think after that, the post-close communication is where a lot of contractors get tripped up, because it's really the easiest way to lock in that long-term trust. And I know this is going to sound weird, but a lot of guys, they'll use subs. And so when they sell a job, they have either that salesman running that project. And so the handoff to the sub is something else that you guys need to be able to track as well. Just wanted to say that before we moved on. It's
a good point too. Let's wrap up with a final thought then for each. Okay. So Kevin, what would you leave every contractor or sales professional with after this discussion? Just wide open question for you right there.
I think like every close is a service opportunity, right? And I always focus on serving property managers. And I see that when you help make the decision safe and you can lay out every step and you handle objections with clarity, you're not just winning a job, you're building a foundation for every future project that's in that manager's portfolio. And I think that's really huge because you can build a never-ending pipeline of work from that.
That's right. You can systemize it. You can put it in a process. And that's how you become a trusted partner, by doing that and continually doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. And if you got an operational tip or a closing script that works or a process improvement that made a difference for your team, share it in the comments. We'll get back to you. We're here to keep leveling things up together. Hope you guys have a great afternoon. Take care.